Hi, welcome to the next in our Women of the Bible series. This week we have three accounts, two of which are interlinked, all three drawn from the book of Judges, and all three come with an MA rating, I think. This week all three accounts speak to the difficulties women have faced not only in the time of Judges but right throughout history, because of the foolish decisions and the evil depredations of men, in the way in which that they have treated women's lives so carelessly and with such casual violence. And Judges doesn't hold anything back from the graphic nature of this, and really peers intently at the evil which had taken hold at various times in the nation of Israel, and the need for judges to come was so great because of the sin and the rottenness at the core of so much behaviour at that time. And it's important to recognise that it's not just that time, that right throughout history, every generation has had elements of these behaviours and attitudes, and they're not right, and God in no way endorses them. So the first account that we have, I think, is a somewhat well-known account, just because of the such tragic nature of it. It is of Jephthah's obedient daughter. We find this in Judges chapter 11, verses 29 to 40. And again, I'd strongly encourage you to read the account either beforehand or as we go through the text. So Jephthah's daughter illuminates the hard realities of daily life during the period of the Judges. This period of Israel's history was a time of widespread defection from and disobedience toward God. Judges were generally political or military leaders whom, imperfect as they were, God was able to use to deliver his people. Nothing is known about this young woman except what is captured in these verses, but they express a significant teaching. Obviously, even though the Spirit of the Lord had come upon him, Jephthah evidently still felt the need to do something further to win the assurance of God's favour in battle. Judges 11 and verse 29. Making a vow before battle was common, and Jephthah lived in a society where human sacrifices to pagan gods were routine. The original language indicates that Jephthah intentionally made a vow which could well include human sacrifice, although God had specifically prohibited such. Leviticus 18 and verses 21, and also Leviticus 20 and verses 1 to 5. This vow signifies Jephthah's incomplete knowledge of, or blatant insensitivity to, the law of Moses. So what do we learn about this young girl in these few verses? When her father returned after the battle with the Ammonites, she ran to greet him with timbrels and dancing, the customary greeting of women for their men who are returning victoriously from battle. No doubt she was as horrified as he was when she learned that she was to be the fulfillment of her father's vow. Rather than grieving over the tragedy that she would never marry and have children, or even the tragedy of her impending death, as Josephus and most commentators understand the passage to mean, she submitted to the very limited understanding she had of her father's fatal vow. Judges 11 and verse 36. This young girl exhibited total commitment, albeit to a misguided understanding of God's expectations. So what can Jephthah's daughter teach women today? Certainly, she's a sterling example of a daughter's willing obedience to her father and total commitment to God. However, and it's a very big however, maybe the lesson isn't for women in her situation. Rather, with the entire witness of Scripture as guidance for life, there is little excuse, really no excuse, for such gross misrepresentation of God's requirements. Today, as in the time of Jephthah's daughter, children often bear the consequences of their parents' decisions. Parents need to be exceedingly wise as well as deliberate in making decisions that affect children's lives. The next account is drawn from Judges 19, and it's a particularly confronting account. Just please be aware of this as you read it, and don't want to cause anybody any distress. This is about a Levite and his concubine, and just the appalling circumstances that transpire. So, a concubine was one who had privilege over slaves, but not a full legal wife, and I guess in a way treated like a mistress that we would refer to. Slightly different context, of course. She'd been unfaithful to the Levite and had left him, according to Judges 19:2. In 19:3, the Levite had gone after her. They had come from the house of the concubine's father in Bethlehem when they stopped in Gibeah for the night. As darkness came, apparently nobody in Gibeah wanted to extend hospitality to the Levite, his servant, and his concubine. Having intentionally passed by the pagan city of Jebus, this was renamed Jerusalem after David's conquest, they had sought a better place of rest among the Israelites. Finally, an old man, a foreigner himself in that unfriendly town, opened his home, ominously begging them not to spend the night outside in the marketplace. Then, while they were eating and resting, men who were willing sodomites surrounded the house, seeking to rape the Levite guest. The Levite, supposedly a spiritual leader, sacrificed his defenseless concubine to a night of brutality to save his own life. This incident occurred during the darkest period of Israel's history, during which everyone was a law unto himself. Judges 21 and verse 25. How shocking it is that when everyone is a law unto himself, we retreat into the most basest and wicked of behaviours. Israel as a community was repulsed by this heinous crime and accordingly took serious steps to hold the guilty accountable. Judges chapter 20 and verse 6, verse 13 and verse 23. The concubine was betrayed. She was raped, tortured, and murdered. She lived in an unjust world where violence permeated even the closest relationships, and where moral decay extended even to the spiritual leaders. This leads into our third and final account, that of the wives of Benjamin, which we find in Judges chapter 21. The hideous murder of the Levite's concubine provoked a bloody civil war, in which only 600 unmarried men of the tribe of Benjamin survived. Judges 20 and verse 47. In the wake of this retaliatory crime of passion, the opposing tribes swore an unwise oath not to allow their daughters to marry Benjamites. Judges 21 and verses 1 and 18. The elders of Israel, instead of consulting the Lord, again tried by their own means to correct the wrong perpetrated. Every wrong was answered with another wrong, which is certainly not God's way. Question then arose concerning how to preserve the future of the tribe of Benjamin. The Israelite leaders continued their own problem solving with their proposed abduction of the innocent women of Jabesh Gilead and Shiloh. The men of Benjamin were instructed to choose wives from the surviving 400 young virgins of Jabesh Gilead. Judges 21, 11 to 12. The remaining 200 Benjamites without spouses were to capture the daughters of Shiloh for wives. Verses 14 and then verses 19 to 23. The local unmarried women from the Shiloh area were merely celebrating the festival, likely the Feast of Tabernacles, by dancing in the vineyards. As unmarried women, they were viewed as potential wives for the Benjamites. The senseless and cruel plan was to ambush the young virgins, seize the number required, and carry them off. This highly unorthodox method of obtaining a wife must have disturbed the relatives of the victims. Though there is no explicit recorded complaint from the fathers or brothers of these innocent young women, the elders were certain enough that such would be forthcoming that they prepared an answer. Verse 22. Against a sordid background of violence and immorality, the record of the Israelite judges closes with a reminder of the lawlessness that prevailed, as everyone did what was right in their own eyes. Sexual perversion and family erosion left women as pawns in the power broking of the tribes. In the midst of sin and tragedy, these women married, bore children, and reared another generation. God, in His grace, used the victims of this tragedy to accomplish His own purpose in selecting Saul, a member of the tribe of Benjamin, as the first king of Israel. 1 Samuel chapter 9 and verses 1 and 2. Thanks very much.